Alright, I'm really excited for this because this is my favorite matchup from round 1. It is the perfect clash of old versus new. On one side we have 6A9 Ace Matador, hereafter referred to as AM. And he was a great player in all three of OU, UU, and of course Ubers when DPP was the current gen. And on the other side, we have ZF, a new player, or okay, he's not new at this point, a newer player comparatively, who has excelled in OU, Little Cup, and Ubers, also across multiple generations. So, both players are famously creative, and I am really looking forward to seeing what they bring. So, they start off by bringing Fortress and Dio Speed. So, Dio is currently having, or has always really had trouble fitting fire moves in its moveset. So Fortress at least is not, I mean, it's not even strong enough to KO Fori from full. So Fori at least isn't fearing a turn 1 KO. And if Dio chooses to attack it on the first turn, then it means it's not preventing what Fori's going to go for, which is spikes or T-spikes. Only Taunt will prevent that, and Taunt at least means DOS isn't getting up hazards. You know, a trick would be annoying. Getting a Fori trick to Scarf is never good, but again, the hazards are going to carry, and you would start out with those. So, we don't know anything else just yet. It's too early to make any sort of inferences, as we have seen a really diverse blend of Pokemon supporting both of these leads. So we can't definitively say, or even reasonably say, oh, this Fori is going to anchor a stall team, or this DOS is going to lead off super hyper offensive teams. You know, it's likely, but if there are two players who are capable of subverting our expectations and doing it well, then it's these two. So Fori is going to go for hazards, and DOS is going to go for whatever its moveset dictates it will go for. In this case, it's Trick, and Fori lays down Toxic Spikes. So TS is going to limit a lot of obnoxious stuff, Kyogre first and foremost, but also Groudon, Darkrai, Garchomp, Palkia. So now AM, well, I guess he could go for a second layer of T-Spikes, which, you know, might be helpful, especially if he's stacking lots of Protects or Subs, things like that. But it's also fairly likely that he switches out and tries to limit DOS from stacking a million spikes of its own. Giratina Origin is the most likely option, and that's exactly what comes in. So Giratina O will limit DOS to 2 layers of spikes. Well, either you accept DOS, if you EQ here, you know, expecting a Dialga or something to come in, mostly Dialga, then you either hit Dialga on the switch in, or you take the third layer from DOS, knowing that you are up 6-5, you've got, you know, a healthy team, and they still don't have rocks. So if the Dialga does come in, then you can attack it at least once before switching out. So it's not a bad situation to be in, and it is much better than Shadow Sneaking as Dialga comes in. That is what you generally want to avoid at all costs. So you only sneak if you're certain that DOS is not coming back in. So, where's DOS? And it's also because I thought Evanescence was playing or something. Kind of sounded like it. Anyway, so yeah, DOS would really love the third layer because the second layer of spikes is not so much better than the third. So generally EQ is considered, you know, good here. So what happens is Dialga comes in, and AM does indeed sneak, so that's what you want to avoid. And the Dialga does show lefties, so AM could, you know, go for EQ here since the rocks are very telegraphed. Could even, you know, try to 3-8 KO the Dialga with EQ because they so commonly run Dragon Pulse over Draco Meteor. But we don't know that yet. So instead he goes to Groudon, he decides, you know, I'm going to match these rocks. So that's another good way to do it. If the Dialga's going to rock, then the Groudon will too. And rocks and T-Spikes are also some good hazards to have laid up. So in comes Giratina Origin, and AM does not go for rocks, and he makes a great move in T-Waves, which guarantee. Well, DOS was definitely not coming in here, and the Tina O switch was quite telegraphed. And I mean, even if Dialga stays in, T-Waving Dialga is generally good. You know, now, well, Fortress is going to not be too threatening to it in a vacuum anyway because it's Scarf, but other stuff outspeeding it, like one's own Dialga or one's own Giratina Origin, We don't know how fast or slow that one is. Could be one of those. I really think that players are either the Giratina Origins are becoming max speed like more consistently, or and I said this in another video, I think, if the Giratina O, you know you're going to be switching it into Groudon, then I really think that players are going to start making it really slow, because what's the point of speed EVs if you're just going to switch it into something that's consistently T-waving you? And that way you get a lot more bulk, you get a lot of power, and so on. So, yeah, T-waving Dialga would hardly be the worst thing in the world, and you can still get up rocks after. Just like T-waving Giratina here, I mean, it also gives you the benefit. Now if Giratina attacks you, there's a chance you get up rocks for free because of the full para. So, rocks, Draco, does a lot. So, AM is continuing the trend of the old school players coming back to this tournament, running physically defensive Groudon, as Spadef was not popular or, used at all even back then. I'm sure someone messed around with it once or twice, and like people use Spadef investment, but like no one was using Spadef Groudon out and out to with careful like they are now. So the Draco does do a significant chunk. So Groudon is basically down for the count because Fori's not getting a spin-off. It's Scarfed and Giratina's at full health. And there are multiple hazards. So if ZF is running some sort of rain offense with a Kingdra, then he would be in a good position here, for sure. I mean, the T-Spikes are going to limit it, but but the Groudon being so low is still a very good thing for a potential Kyogre trying to win the Weather War. So Fori is used to switch into the -2 Giratina with a Scarf, and the opposing Pokemon paralyzed. Fortress can, in fact, outspeed the opposition. So I don't see Fortress doing anything other than spiking. Well, Spike's admittedly going to be very useful here. And with Giratina, I mean, I can't see... ZF is going to stay in, because it would be stupid to, switch out and let AM spin or something. And, if he wants to spike, he wants to spike. It's not worth the risk of, him spinning and undoing all your hard work. Amy could probably get the hazards up again, but, not worth it. Fori, it's going to spike either way. May as well hit it. You can see what it locks into and then really take advantage of it once you know it's spiking. Switch to Latias and get up a Calm Mind or something. So Fori definitely going to spike and then probably switch out. Now that the Giratina is at -4, it's really, its threat level is severely diminished. And if it has HP Fire, it's going to KO, and it does. Oh, it actually doesn't because it's at -4, even though it's in Sun. So Fori lived in HP Fire in Sun. That's incredible. And HP Fire Giratina used to be like the standard mixed Tina set once Heart Gold and Soul Silver came out and gave it Shadow Sneak. And everyone was using HP Fire because Fortress was everywhere and Scizor was everywhere. So you don't see that too much, and that changes things. Now it makes it much more likely that ZF is packing Groudon, because you can, if you're running Groudon and Kyogre, you can get away with running Thunder on Giratina more often, but HP Fire is definitely feels like more of a waste. So, the HP Fire is also I'm glad we're seeing it. Giratina shouldn't ever fully drop it from its movesets. Otherwise, people start getting cocky. But yeah, AM also has littered the fields with hazards, and Spikes are going to be digging into the Dialga now. So he's exerting pressure of his own. I mean, he's going to lose the Fori here, but he's got a lot of pressure with which to batter down ZF. The bigger problem is that Groudon is very low. So ZF is now going to sack DOS, then it'll be 5-5, and then ZF will probably respond with something that AM is forced to sack again, so 5-4. And so AM, besides the Giratina, he's going to have some offensive pokes that are real good progress makers. Another great thing about that T-Wave from Groudon is that it ensures that AM's Giratina O is going to outspeed ZF's Giratina O, and he can launch a big Draco Meteor, so I assume that's what's going to happen here. Tina O comes in, and no, Ho-Oh comes in instead, and that is exciting. We don't know what it's going to do. So it roosts up, obviously, and Outrage. So this is truly the most classic of the classic mixed Tina O's. Back before they started back before Heatran was popular, and before they started slapping EQ over Outrage. We had HP Fire for Fori's, Outrage to ruin Blissey. I think ZF's been a very heavy prep guy throughout his career, and You know, he knows AM is old school, so maybe he expected some, you know, Fortress Blissey stall, which this Tina set was famed for, you know, destroying those kinds of stall teams. So, Ho-Oh roosts, we can assume sub or protect roost, and both of which are monstrous hazard abusers. And both are pretty nasty, especially with the sun up. And now that we've seen HP Fire from ZF's Giratina, it makes it pretty unlikely that he's going to be able to threaten it with a Kyogre, which means probably a lot of Pokemon that don't love going one-on-one with it. All it has to do is outlast this paralyzed Giratina's outrages, which are Grisiosaur boosted and thus annoying, but you know, nothing insurmountable with paralysis and the fact that it's about to become confused. So there's the para, and there's the confusion. So if it subs, then it's probably happening here. And Dialga switches in, which almost guarantees, I mean, unless he has no better option, but it guarantees that he either has Roar or is admitting to losing the game on the spot. Because if that Dialga does not have Roar and it's just Dragon Pulse or Draco Meteor and Thunder and like Protect or something, and he's just like hoping to stall it out of Sacred Fire with Protect on pressure or something silly like that, then I mean the game's basically over. One burn and then he doesn't even have to attack it anymore. He'll just sub roost it till the cows come home. So that's an ad. That actually looks important. But right now we have a Ho-Oh versus Dialga matchup, and the Sacred Fire is gonna really, really hurt. But yeah, he's gotta attack it, and problem is that the Ho-Oh is now going to be really vulnerable when it comes back. And Sacred Fire does a ton, 60, and gets the burn. So the good news for AM is that Palkia is now looking a lot more threatening. You know, a team of 3 unrevealed Pokemon that probably don't love dealing with it that well. DOS basically gone, Giratina vulnerable to it. Dialga basically down, which is huge. I mean, so many teams rely on Dialga being healthy to stave off Palkia. So that's really big. And the bad news is, of course, he's got another Pokemon that, you know, with ZF, he's just only got one unrevealed, and Ho-Oh is now going to be at 25 when it comes back in, and it's not exactly a speedster. So he's going to have to do a lot with Giratina, Palkia, and his unrevealed poke. So yeah, we don't know if this Palkia is likely Scarf. You generally assume that, but obviously Palkia can punish such assumptions. But before we know AM's last, before we know if it's Mewtwo or, you know, Latias or something, then we generally assume Scarf and then another, you know, decently fast Pokemon, because it's probably not the. I mean, it could also be a Heatran. That would also I mean, AM's got the tools for annoying Pokemon. I mean, Ho and Heatran under Sun with all this hazard support, nice, but you know, opposing hazards and the opposing threats are also tough to deal with. So Palkia and Giratina trying to patch it together, and having ZF's Giratina paralyzed is huge for the advantage with AM's own Giratina. But ZF's got a lot of sacks. I mean, the Dialga can get sacked here, and Deoxys can get sacked later. And now he responds with Jirachi, which, like, if this is the offensive team, it looks like, then probably Scarf, so probably going to U-turn. And if you go first, then you know the Palkia is either, you know, desperate and staying in, and you won the speed tie if it stays in the Spatial Rends again. Well, I guess if it stays in Spatial Rends again, it could also be Lustrous Orb or Happen or something, and just would expect the Jirachi to U-turn out. Either way, Jirachi's U-turning. And, you know, the chip on the Palkia wouldn't even be bad, even if you do wind up sacking Deoxys to it. Yes, Palkia would have, you know, gotten 2 KOs back for AM, but, and, you know, if Jirachi is the Palkia revenge killer of choice, then that's generally not a great sign. But the chip is helpful either way. So either you chip it with U-turn, or, you know, you get the switch advantage. Both are good. So Giratina O comes in. That's a great move from AM, because it forces ZF to reveal something else. Because he'll lose if he, you know, DOS will be a waste of a sack. And ZF's Tina O will be outsped and destroyed, so honestly he hopes that ZF goes to it. And so it forces ZF to lose some of the mystery element he still has. So after this, they will both have the same number of unrevealed Pokemon. So great management of information by AM there, rather than, you know, tossing away Ho-Oh or Groudon or something. So good move. The U-turn does go off, and in comes a Darkrai, T-Spikes, but Lum, so that's rough. It'll be in... Well, if Palkia has Draco Meteor, then it definitely finishes it off. But I'm always so rusty on... Because Darkrai is always so much bulkier than you expect. But, yeah, okay, it's not likely that it is KO'd. Wait, so, no, never mind, it is likely. I'm totally off. So, likely-ish, I mean, with the high crit rate. And 62.5% to KO after rocks and one spike. But ideally, this is why you run Draco on Palkia, to remove that entirely. So what he's going to have to do is sack and then go to Palkia. Unless he's got like some sort of secret anti-Darkrai poke in the last slot. But yeah, he definitely can't afford to lose Giratina O. So Groudon goes down. And then Palk's going to come in. And Dark Void finishes it off. Or Bad Dreams finishes it off. So here comes Palk once again. Assume the DOS is going to be sacked here. And it is. And the good news, at least for AM, is that next time Darkrai will be poisoned. So here comes Jirachi again, assuming that he's going to pull the same trick. Yep, Tina O. I mean, even if he gets Ice Punched, and it does get Ice Punched, then it avoids the 2-hit KO because Giratina O is crazy bulky. And now, I mean, ZF can't really afford to... can't really avoid a KO from Tina O at this point, which is big. I mean, not you turning into Darkrai and having it be at less than 50 would also have not been ideal. But so like that, but that's the whole idea. We don't know his last. He doesn't want to reveal his last for fear of losing the upper hand late in the game, and you know it's because it's very likely Groudon at this point. That's less of a secret. But I guess he doesn't want it to start taking T-Spikes damage before it has to. So U-turn wouldn't have helped too much. Darkrai would have forced Palkia in once more. At least it would have taken out Ho-Oh and forced in Palkia once more, and then that might have been exploitable. So I do think maybe a U-turn. I'm not gonna like full deep dive into it, but I think U-turn into maybe ZF was afraid of the Palkia staying in. Ice Punch wasn't a bad move. I mean, it still hits Giratina quite hard. But U-turn, if he went into Darkrai on Tina O and just Dark Pulsed, then I think that probably would have been good. Because he would have been at what, 50, 38, and then 26 after a Dark Pulse, poison damage, Dark Pulse, and then another turn of poison. So not quite in Shadow Sneak range. And not enough for him to be stalled out after coming in. So yeah, I think you turn into Rai might have been good. But now, I mean, he has to. Oh, I guess he goes to Groudon here. I was gonna say, well, I guess he wants to keep Giratina as para. But like the best he could do here is like switch to Tina O on HP Fire or EQ. Both moves that would hit Jirachi, and then threaten with Shadow Sneak, which would probably KO from that range, which is a really risky move because AM could easily just fire off a Grisius or boosted Draco, and if Jirachi does stay in, then not only might it fall into Hazard's range, but it's definitely going to be in range for the follow-up Grisius or Shadow Sneak, and so losing that Jirachi and the Spatial Rend. Well, I mean, after Palkia comes in next time, then Tina O will finish it off with Sneak, so it's not as important, but just losing that Pokemon. But either way, I mean, he's losing something here, and I guess he prefers to keep the speed as he goes to Groudon, which is not Lumberry, and that HP Fire does quite a chunk. So 2 HP Fire Giratinas in one game. Very awesome. And there we see something really, really cool. Now, this is unique for a number of reasons. First of all, Shadow Force is just as strong as Outrage, but it does not lock you in, and which is really big. So it also has really good coverage, because Ghost hits a lot of things really hard if it's neutral, and when invested, Grisius Orb, Stab, all that stuff. And what's really cool is that, unlike Outrage, the extra turn it takes for, as you see here, the extra turn Shadow Force takes and makes you invulnerable while using it, then it racks up another turn of poison damage, and that extra 12.5% from regular poison can be the difference. But I mean, that's huge. I mean, much larger or much smaller percents than that win games all the time. So yeah, I really like the use of Shadow Force on this Giratina. It's not something you see often or ever really. but that's what this tournament is for. And I think most other moves probably would have KO'd Groudon from that range. It's not about like this game being like proof of its genius, but like as soon as you see it in action, see it alongside those T-spikes, then it clicks. You know, you don't need to see a perfect example drawn out to get, oh, that's actually really good. And it's not exactly an easy move to take advantage of, because Giratina is... Like, most of the things that threaten Giratina are going to be faster than it. So it's not like you can pivot to something and that's going to be... Like, the only thing that really resists Shadow Force... Like, if you pivot Dialga in on the Shadow Force charge turn, then yeah, it might be annoying. But as long as you don't just spam Shadow Force mindlessly when there's a healthy Dialga, then you're good to go. Giratina has a lot of other moves. So yeah, I really wanted to highlight that. And now we're going to see Shadow Force destroy the Groudon. That was satisfying. So, yeah. In comes Darkrai again. We're going to see the Ho-Oh sack almost assuredly, as Darkrai is not going to... Well, Darkrai could switch out and switch back in once more, but it would really be getting ravaged by hazards, and I think being Tina's Shadow Sneak range, yeah, it'd be at like 38-ish after this poison turn, and then, you know, minus another 25, so 13, so yeah, probably. Especially because I assume if it has Shadow Force, then probably has a healthy chunk of attack investment. So yeah, Ho-Oh being sacked here. Oh no, he just sneaks it. He gets 15%, so yeah, it would have been in range. And so I guess he's keeping Ho-Oh just in case, like the Tina... Well, AM's timer was at full before this, and you know, let me just show you. This is a great example of planning the endgame out. This is, you know, if you have a full timer, absolutely do this. Now, maybe don't risk timing out if you go down to 15 or something, but this is... I really, really recommend, you know, taking... He's planning out every option. You know, what happens if I Shadow Sneak and get KO'd by Dark Pulse? What do I do after? Okay, I go Palkia and I Spatial Rend, and then what? Then Tina-O comes in. Then I go to my last unrevealed poke. You know, can I still handle the Jirachi? All those lines, because he has the time to map them out. So there's no reason to go into a blind when you have the time to think it out. So... we'll see how the Shadow Sneak works. We'll see if preserving the Ho-Oh winds up being worth it. I mean, he certainly thought it out. You know, that's not to say that if you think about it long enough, then it'll be correct necessarily, but it was not done without thought. So here comes Palk. Darkrai no longer... So that Sneak does do one cool thing in that, if nothing else, it ensures that Darkrai cannot come into hazards at all anymore. So it will go down, and he goes for Outrage. Another, you know, choice you don't see on Scarf Palkia too much anymore, but Outrage on it or Scarf Dialga is useful for Calm Mind Laddies, which can survive with their Soul Dew and Calm Mind Boost. They can survive even Draco Meteors. So Outrage, and that's going to get its revenge killed by Palkia, which wins the speed tie, and it goes for Iron Head. So from 25%, it just needs one flinch on Ho-Oh. So we don't know the last just yet, and what we assume he took it into account, and you know, I assume that if his last couldn't handle Jirachi at all, he would have sacked the Ho-Oh, because like if you go to Jirachi, or you go to Palkia after and you Outrage, and you know, you potentially get that speed tie, then the Jirachi is in, you know, hazards and Shadow Sneak range. So I assume that the last can handle the Jirachi without the help of, you know, without relying on Ho-Oh. It still might have been better to go to Ho-Oh after, but, you know, AM can probably give his own reasoning. That's what those post-tournament videos are for. And the flinch, and we are going to see that last Pokemon. So Iron Head takes it out, and it's Kyogre. We don't know what kind of Kyogre it is. Depending on what it is, it's, you know, if the Palkia is clearly Scarf, so it could be a number of things. And it's not just about, you know, withstanding Jirachi Iron Heads, it's about being able to handle the Tina-O afterwards. So there's an Iron Head, and there's a flinch. Yikes. He's quickly in a Shadow Sneak range if this next one flinches, but the second one does not flinch, nor does it crit, and the Ice Beam takes it out. And the Ice Beam thinks, oh, is it like a dual Scarf, or is it going to be Specs? Because there would be no reason to just Ice Beam if you were unboosted and potentially not KO the Jirachi. So the Tina O comes in, so it all comes. So if I'm ZF, then, well, I guess you can either bank on, if you're afraid of Specs KOing you with Ice Beam, then you can Shadow Sneak and hope for a crit. Or if you don't think that it's going to be a Specs Ice Beam, then you just use a non-sneak attack, and that means you actually KO the Kyogre in one shot, so you don't have to worry about getting one of two full paras. As you would if you just Shadow Sneaked, lived the hit, and then had to Shadow Sneak again. So, with something like Specs Kyogre, then, I mean, its water moves are obviously its most potent and fearsome, but its Ice Beam is nothing to sneeze at either. So, here we see the calc for Timid Specs Kyogre. We see Timid, which does 78.5 to 92.5, which is a 37.5 chance to KO a 0 bulk Tina O after rocks. And for Modest, that becomes an 87.5 chance to KO after rocks. And this, of course, there's also the crit chance and the chance that Tina can full para, so, some pretty good odds minimum. Now, if it's Timid Kyogre and the Giratina has some bulk, then it gets more complicated. But we have no way of knowing if the Tina has bulk, since it only switched into the Groudon's T-Wave earlier on, and yeah, switched into T-Wave, got off a Draco Meteor. It was pretty meaty. HP fired 4 looked to have a healthy chunk of special attack investment, but that doesn't mean it has or doesn't have bulk. And had some decent attack investment with Outrage too, but we don't know how bulky the Ho-Oh was, so nothing to really say about if it had bulk or not. Didn't take any hits. And didn't outspeed anything notable because it didn't have the chance because it instantly got T-Wave. So, it all comes down to this last turn, Specs Ice, or what we assume is Specs Ice Beam. If he went for it there, and the fact it's likelier, the fact he went for it against Jirachi, and the fact it's not very likely at all for him to have Scarf Palkia and Scarf Kyogre. So, yeah, this is Specs Ice Beam. Will it KO the Giratina? Will it crit? Will the Tina para? Will the Shadow Sneak crit? All these questions and more to be answered right now. It goes off. He does Shadow Sneak. No crit, Ice Beam, clean KO. Whew. Wow. So, a nail biter, and Ace Matador takes the lead 1-0. Game 2. Kyogre lead, Heatran lead. Now, I gotta say, I have never seen a Heatran lead in Ubers ever. And if I did, then I assume I forgot it because it was someone who accidentally wandered onto the Uber's ladder with their OU team that led Heatran. To my knowledge, Heatran has never been led seriously in Ubers. If you really think about it, then you say, oh, I guess Magma Storm can deal with Sash leads. That's pretty cool, and it can get up rocks if Fortress leads are popular, and it can, maybe it can do some other cool stuff. Who's to say? But as of this moment, it is thoroughly unexplored. And unless it's Focus Sash, it's not staying in on Kyogre here. So the answer is Latias. So, it makes it look even more like an OU team. But then it takes 30% from Hydro Pump, and you realize it's Soldew, so very much not OU. So Blissey comes in. Absorbs a Draco for a pretty hefty 30. So now we don't know if ZF is running some bulky offense with Blissey or some stallier stuff. Rocking Blissey is not as common in Ubers as in OU. It's more focused on its supporting capabilities, Wish, Aroma, statuses. But it could definitely run rocks if it wanted to. I mean, it's got all the opportunity in the world with all the special attacks flying around. So Heatran comes back in to get up rocks, and Blissey tosses up rocks. So this is like an OU game with a Kyogre almost. So the rocks go up from Heatran, and Blissey T-Waves, and Heatran has Lum. So this suddenly has me thinking, because a long time ago, like 9 years ago or something insane like that, 9.5 at this point maybe even, there was a French player named Goten, and he came up with what we called Goten-Tran. And it was a Machamp lead for OU designed to beat, or it was a lead for OU designed to beat Machamp and Roserade. It had enough bulk to survive Machamp's Dynamic Punch and Bullet Punch with Lumberry to shrug off confusion, whereas the Lumberry would also protect it from Roserade's Sleep Powder, and it would Magma Storm it down to the Sash and beat it. And against Machamp, it could get up rocks and then explode or something. So, point being, that's my first instinct, because that's the only time you ever see Lumheatran in OU. It's the only time you ever see Lumheatran ever. Now, I don't think it's the exact same set copy and pasted, because Machamp lead does not exist in Ubers. And if you think to yourself, oh, it actually sounds pretty good, then just remember that Hariyama exists and does it way better. Because it doesn't need to, it's got Fake Out and Bullet Punch and stronger thanks to Guts and yeah. So yeah, don't use Machamp when there's Hariyama. So yeah, I don't think it's the exact same set copy pasted, but it might be the same idea, because you know you have Lum for Darkrai's Dark Void and you know the aforementioned Magma Storm for all the Sash leads. So yeah, and it might still run defense EVs anyway to survive DOA's superpower. I have no doubt Heatran could do that with some investment. And it doesn't need to run a lot of speed either. So it could really be that ported over to Ubers. So Blissey tries to get the T-Wave off, is not successful, and now that Kyogre did not come in, I think it might have been better if Kyogre did come in instantly, because rocks, and now, I mean, I don't think you can really know what to expect necessarily, but Kyogre instantly threatens Heatran out and with, you know, a KO. And I guess you could think, well, you wouldn't think it was Sash or something because it switched out on the first turn. I don't know, and I don't think that would make too much sense anyway. But I think it would be better to go Kyogre and just attack rather than just the T-Wave, because T-Wave doesn't really prevent it from booming instantly, whereas, you know, going to Kyogre does in most cases. And now it threatens Boom on Blissey or Kyogre, neither of which are great options. If you have a Tina O, then it can eat the fire moves in Rain really easily and threaten the Boom, so I don't think Am's necessarily going to Boom just yet. But it's something to watch out for. So here comes the switch to Groudon. Reset. Yeah, he doesn't want to attack in Rain. Doesn't want to boom instantly. And Kyogre comes in here. So that would have been a good target to boom. And Heatran is faster than Blissey. So it switches first. And therefore Groudon sets up the sun. And then Kyogre comes in and sets the Rain right back up. So one turn, the weather changed twice. That's fun. But also notable is that the Groudon has lefties, so it is not affected by the Stealth Rock switch-in. I mean, its item was revealed, but you know, other than that, fine. And Kyogre is not healing that off, so that could be important for a protracted weather war. Now the Ice Beam here, I mean, if you've got a Kyogre against a Groudon and the opponent has a Latias, I mean, even if you don't know that it's a Lati Twin specifically, Ice Beam is just such a great move to spam because it hits Dialga well, hits Palkia better than a water move, and it hits the Lati Twin super effectively. So, I mean, this is your dream scenario to just throw off an Ice Beam. And it's not like the opponent can exactly go to a Steel type to absorb that Ice Beam because, you know, Kyogre threatens water moves. So, AM does go to Dialga to not have... so it's good that he has that backup, because that Hydro does a ton of damage. And he did not want Latias to absorb the bulk, the brunt of that Ice Beam. And I'm thinking this is like a Specs lead Kyogre with Hydro, which is definitely interesting. I have to calc versus Soldew how much that Hydro did. But yeah, it definitely seems like a lot. Okay, no, I don't think it's I don't think it's Hydro here. I think it's just like modest and because it did 30, so I think it's just like a... But I do think it's modest. And I think that Dialga has like no bulk at all. So it's definitely something offensive. Yeah. Look at max special. Look at that damage. My goodness. So, yeah, that... I was going to say like naive, like minus but F Dialga at first, but no, that's just Kyogre being a beast. So Dialga doesn't quite threaten it from full, but Kyogre doesn't exactly love taking the hit. But then again, switching into Dialga isn't too pleasant unless you think it's not going to have Adamant Orb Outrage, in which case you have a Blissey. So it's up to what ZF thinks. He thinks, all right, he's challenging it to Outrage, and it outrages. We've been seeing a lot of surprise outrages from Dialga and Giratina Origin in this tour. The number 1 and 2 used Mons in the tour, and in general. So yeah, Blissey gets melted, and now Heatran is looking like a real threat if it gets in, especially in the sun. Especially if Kyogre switches in, because, I mean, it's taking rocks damage that it's not healing off. But ZF reveals a Fortress, so he does have some sort of stallish component to his team. And Dialga locked into Outrage, and in Rain, I mean, this is prime spin fodder. But another classic OU dynamic, the spin attempt from Fortress, when the Stealth Rocker's Heatran, it comes back in and pops the rocks right back up. So ZF decides to not waste time with that and just gets up spikes for some more permanent pressure, wearing down Dialga, so its switches are limited. I mean, it's not switching into Kyogre anymore, certainly, but its switches are limited in general. And Groudon is going to be chipped away at as well. So he's exerting more pressure in the hazards department, but now he's got to switch into the Kyogre, and Heatran does go for Magma Storm. And it does crit, which lets it do a pretty healthy chunk, but more important is that the Magma Storm does the extra bit of 6% and prevents Kyogre from switching out. So if he wants to take the risk, like if he's a timid Heatran, which does get the jump on most mid-range Kyogres, which most of the lead Kyogres are, then I guess he can risk it, but it almost would feel like a waste when he's got the Lottie to switch in now. And I guess he decided to risk it, or he just didn't. I think he valued Latias more, because Latias threatens so much more, and Blissey is at 14% after rock, so it's looking pretty threatening. So he decides to let Heatran go, so definitely a fair call. It's not risking Latias. And yeah, Blissey is ZF is forced to switch to Magnezone to not lose a Pokemon to Latias, and that's generally Magnezone is generally not a great Latias switch. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world temporarily, but in this case, it's definitely a sign of danger. So Groudon comes in, as it does easily against Latias, or against Magnezone, and Magnezone pops a Thunder looking for a Para. I think that might have been a bit hasty. I don't think Latias was going to stay. I mean, it obviously doesn't have Surf, and a Rainy HP Fire isn't going to do anything, and if it stayed in on Zone, then it would have just, what's it called? Risk status, so I don't think it was ever switching in there, so I don't think Thunder was the move when Groudon was, especially when Groudon was obviously the switch. Problem is we don't know what ZF has to double switch to really take advantage of that Groudon switch, because he can't exactly double to Kyogre, because then it'll be at 34, and Latias is at full HP now that it recovered. Good move on AM's end. And yeah, so Ice Beam, I mean, then you have to switch into Lottie again, and I guess Groudon's taking spikes, but that's a very it's not nearly enough to justify the constant threat that Latias is posing. But he's got to have something else to handle Groudon, because he's got none of his Pokemon his 4 shown Pokemon resist ground. So I think Lugia could have come in there and gotten a bit of an advantage over the Groudon. Limit its leftovers turns, prevent it from doing anything stupid on the switch like Lava Plume or Roar. And a Quagsire gets dragged in, so there's ZF's Kyogre counter. So I love Quag, good to see it. And so it's an very interesting stall team, very ambitious. So Lugia is, I mean, Quag can Toxic the Groudon, which is definitely helpful, but Kyogre is very worn down, and AM has 2 unrevealed healthy Pokemon, so who knows. And yeah, Quag is Spadef as heck in Ubers, so it does not take kindly to even unboosted Groudon EQs. So, and AM forces the recover and goes to Latias. And here is the problem. Now, Quagsire can shrug off a Draco Meteor, but it definitely doesn't shrug off a Grass Knot. And Latias loves running Grass Knot because it hits Kyogre and Groudon in one move without dropping special attack like Draco Meteor. And it also slams T-Tar real good. And in this case, it also slams Kyogre, but he doesn't have a switch in. Now, you could say, oh, well, what about Magnezone? And then you think, well, what the common coverage on, well, it's more commonly seen on Latios, but now on Latias as well. Draco, Grass Knot, HP Fire for steals, and the sun is up. So, even if you went to Magnezone, it just threatens to KO you with a Sunny HP Fire, and you have to pivot to Kyogre on HP Fire and make it take more damage just to reset the weather. And, the Latias problem is not going away by any stretch of the imagination. So, yeah, that Dialga instant outrage, pulling the trigger was really, really big, because now Latias is looking Like, it might threaten to end the game on the spot. I mean, Lugia speed ties with it, but if it's HP Fire, then... but that would require Lugia to be absolute max speed, and a lot of them like some bulk. You know, drop into Chomp speed and some bulk, and... yeah, so, not a guarantee by any means. I mean, if he can get around this Latios, then depending on the offensive Pokemon that AM is rounding his team out with, like a Giratina Origin or something, then the Lugia can potentially be very annoying. You know, Latios doesn't exactly like going one-on-one with it. But at this stage, then it just threatens, it's threatening everything, and AM can, like, or ZF can barely hurt it. Just realized ZF AM, the two-letter acronym users. Anyway, so here comes Lugia, hoping, faster and can, recover, and then maybe it'll settle into a groove, because it is annoying to offensive teams, but, it's in a bad position. It's, fighting from behind, and Latias is faster, and Draco meteors it. Sorry, that animation was messed up. So Grass Knot, and Lugia comes in and gets Draco meteored into a fine powder. So now, maybe Blissey can soft boil on it, but, still very, very behind. I mean, Blissey coming back. I mean, the Dialga is also a huge threat at this point. So Kyogre comes in, resets the weather, and I don't know why probably because my computer is old. But yeah, Kyogre, and the stupid ad was playing. So yeah, Kyogre comes in. Yeah, so many words at once. Kyogre comes in, resets the weather, draws a -2 Grass Knot. Fortress is not going to fear -2 HP Fire and Rain. AM resets the Sun, goes to Groudon, and Fori gets a spin-off. So that at least alleviates some pressure on Kyogre. But the thing is that, I mean, he can Toxic, and, the Groudon's not likely to have a Fire move at this point. But it's the EQ spam that's going to be a problem. And Blissey is still at very low health. So he decides to preserve the Fortress. I don't know if I fully agree with that, but... well, I guess if he's going to follow it up with Kyogre, then that's one thing. But he's got to... yeah, he's going to follow it up with Kyogre, and then double... I think he's got to double to Blissey, and then from 26 to 32-ish, then he'll be out of Draco Meteor, which did 30 the first time. So he'll be out of range, so he can soft-boiled, and then maybe try to withstand the Groudon now that it's Toxic, and it's support, so he can probably switch into it with Fortress. So I think that's the plan. Oh, he just goes right for Surf! AM makes a great move in that... so actually, that was a really smart move. He doesn't... because now he prevented the Blissey from healing up. He ensured the condition, as my friend Hack would like to say. So yeah, now Latias comes in and threatens again. And, grabs it's likely a KO, or HP Fire, Grass Knot. Fortress has to explode itself just to... well, actually, at this point, then, if Fortress, like, explodes itself, then it'll... oh, he pivots to Blissey on HP Fire. Very nicely done there. But, even though it's HP Fire, unstab HP Fire in rain against Blissey, it still does 5%. So, it barely is... Lefty's heals 1 point, so it's still out of range for... or still in Draco Meteor range, very much in that range. So yeah, if Fori explodes itself, then I think Dialga just outrages twice and wins. So, I mean, ZF just barely staying alive. But AM does not mess around with Draco stuff, and instead he goes to Lucario, revealing that. And Fori, best case scenario, it explodes. It's not going to be running EQ. And Fori SDs, and yeah, so this was always going to be a very uphill game, as SD, close combat, and that is going to be it. So, this was a great series that really lived up to my expectations for the standards and in both team building and play that I hold these players up to, personally. And yeah, so I'm very much looking forward to see what they will do next. I hope you guys enjoyed the series, and I am going to catch you in the next one.